In the early 1990s, the arcade industry bore witness to a sudden spurt in growth fueled by the popularity of one game in particular. Street Fighter II rebirthed the one-on-one fighting genre and created a massive boon for arcade owners. Now, in the wake of this, many other studios decided that they themselves wanted a piece of that sweet beat-em-up action. Probably chief amongst these was SNK, who launched numerous franchises such as Art of Fighting, King of Fighters, and Samurai Showdown. But above all of this stood one franchise, Midway's Mortal Kombat. In many respects, it was the only fighting franchise of that one-on-one 2D era to match Street Fighter II in terms of its popularity. And today, I'm going to have a look at 4 different home ports of this game and see whether it was worth all the hype. So, first up is the Nintendo Game Boy version. Yes, Acclaim Entertainment, who had the rights, challenged Probe Developments to create a Game Boy version of Mortal Kombat. And you know what? Given the limitations of the hardware, it's not actually as bad as you would think. I mean, let's be honest, the Game Boy is basically a simple Z80 based handheld console, so realistically, it isn't hugely more powerful than, say, a Sinclair Spectrum. But here you go, yes, there's a limited character roster of just 6 playable characters, and the graphics look somewhat interesting in 4 shades of grey, and it is a bit slow and jerky. But the fact is, Probe managed to get Mortal Kombat running on the Game Boy. Now, there are better one-on-one fighting games for the Game Boy. I personally would choose Killer Instinct myself, but it's a commendable effort, although not necessarily one you may want to play more than once just for curiosity, which is why emulation is king here, people. Only buy this game as a physical copy if you really must be a Mortal Kombat completist. That's my recommendation, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, Mortal Kombat for the Game Boy. Not bad, but not brilliant either. Next up, we have the Super Nintendo version. Again, Acclaim had the rights to it, although this time they got sculptured software to produce this version rather than Probe. Now, I'll give a lot of credit to this Super Nintendo version. It does look superb. It's the best looking of the 16-bit versions in terms of accurately recreating the arcade machine, although there are a few problems here. First off, due to Nintendo's policies of the time, all the blood and gore is gone, so no fatalities, no founts of blood when you uppercut somebody or really lay into them. You get the full roster of characters from the arcade, which is good, and it does look pretty, as I said, but Mortal Kombat is missing something without the violence. And also, the play area is slightly zoomed in, which actually changes the flow of the game compared to the arcade original. As you can see there's sweat that bursts from the opponents when you really lay into them. But the game does look nice. You know, it's as close a facsimile of the arcade machine as you could reasonably expect at the time. Now, my next door neighbour and friend at the time had this for his SNES, and we did put many hours into playing it, although we did want the blood and gore because, you know, teenage boys, violent video games. It's a cliche, but it's true. That's what people looked for. Now, coming next will be a move over to the Sega systems, where you will see the differences. But, you know, if you've got a Super Nintendo, as I do, I recommend purchasing this. It's more than worth your money. It's reasonably cheap to get hold of. It plays reasonably well, but it's not the true Mortal Kombat experience. Next on the list, we return to the work of Probe, who produced a version of the game for Sega's Master System and Game Gear, which are more or less the same. The Game Gear does use a slightly more zoomed in view, and this was released under the Arena Entertainment banner rather than Acclaim, although it was essentially the same company. Now again, this is an incredible port. You can actually put a code in to get the blood and gore, which I couldn't remember when I recorded this footage, so you won't get to see it, unfortunately. But it is a damn good game. Again, given the limitations of the hardware. Obviously, like the Game Boy, Probe had colour graphics to work with here, which makes the game look more authentic. Again, just 6 fighters, that's fine. You can choose a difficulty setting, and it looks good, especially when you think of the limits. This was a piece of hardware that was produced back in 1984, 85, and there you had it. It doesn't look the best, but hell, it looks pretty darn good. Yes, there are cutbacks. There's very, very few stages available as backgrounds. Like I said, there's only 6 characters, and you are working on a 2-button control scheme. But it is an incredibly fun version of the game to play. I had a Master System at the time, as well as a Mega Drive, and I must have rented this version from the video store so many times because it just impressed me so much that they managed to cram as much of the arcade machine into a simple little Sega system like the Master System and do it so damn well. Yes, the gameplay is a little more stilted, but I can't really think of many better games of this type on the Master System, apart from maybe Masters of Kombat. And again, this is a fairly cheap game to buy, so if you want to give it a try and you don't want to emulate, find a cheap cartridge copy. There's plenty out there. And now we arrive at the Sega Mega Drive version, Sega's 16-bit machine. Again, it's a solid conversion by Probe, although this time you get a much more authentic arcade experience. With Sega not having the same kind of controls as you probably, as I said, for the Master System, you can input the code, as you can see here. I could remember this one, and you get all the blood and gore and fatalities of the arcade machine. You get a good roster of characters, although unlike the SNES version, there are a few cutbacks in terms of palettes and animation, but you do get the full set of 7 playable characters. And unlike the SNES version, the aspect ratio and playfield size is the same as the arcade, so it feels more authentic, even if it doesn't necessarily look quite as good. But you can see there are a few differences. This background is slightly more detailed in terms of having 3 layers of monks as opposed to 2 on the SNES version, and it does play really well. I did eventually get this myself, and I still have a copy of this to this day, and I have to be honest, and this is going to be controversial, I prefer playing this to pretty much any one-on-one beat-em-up on the Mega Drive. I think it plays better, and it plays better than the SNES version, and I personally prefer it to Street Fighter 2. I don't know why, I just do. Controversial opinion there, I'm sure. But this is a game that translated well to the Mega Drive, despite the system's limitations. And again, it's available really cheaply for anyone who wants to try it. So get out there, get a copy, give it a go. It's probably the best of the 16-bit versions. And there you have it. Mortal Kombat for the home consoles. 4 versions, 5 if you count the Game Gear as a separate one. And they're not bad. Easily the weakest is the Game Boy version, but that's to be expected. It's by far the weakest of the hardware, but all 4 versions offer something for somebody who wants to experiment with it and has never tried the Mortal Kombat franchise before. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, do give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my content, do subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell if you want to be notified of those occasions when I do upload a new video. But until the next time, this is Rob from 81632bit saying so long, and I'll see you next time.